It started with a scream that sliced through the stillness of the night. Ah! A desperate cry, as if every ounce of hope had been drained. Nkechi's chest tightened, her heart breaking for the loss she'd just suffered. She stood frozen, eyes wide with disbelief, staring at the crumpled letter in her hand. "How could he betray me like this?" she whispered through clenched teeth. The room seemed to close in on her, the weight of the betrayal suffocating. She had known him for years, trusted him with everything. But this was a blow she couldn't have anticipated. The man she loved, the man she thought she could build a future with, had just torn everything apart with one cruel act. She collapsed onto the couch, clutching the letter like a lifeline that was slipping away. In the midst of the pain, anger began to rise within her, hot and fiery. "I will make him pay," she vowed. Her gaze hardened. This wasn't just about love anymore. It was about reclaiming what was rightfully hers. Nkechi could still feel the weight of the letter in her hand, as if it were burning into her skin. She had never felt so betrayed, not in all her years of loving him, of trusting him with everything she was. How could he do this to her? She had always believed in love, believed that she could give her heart and soul to someone, and they would protect it, cherish it. But now, it was clear that her trust had been shattered in the cruelest way possible. He had torn away her faith with a single action. His lies, his deceit. She couldn't bear the thought of them anymore. She closed her eyes tightly, trying to block out the images of their shared moments, now tainted. But no matter how much she tried, the memories clawed at her. Her heart ached, not just because of the betrayal, but because she couldn't understand why. She had been good to him. Why hadn't he been good to her? Nkechi's thoughts were interrupted by a sharp knock on the door. Her heart skipped a beat. She didn't need to open it to know who was standing on the other side. It was him. It had to be. She had known this moment was coming, but now that it was here, she wasn't ready. Her breath caught in her throat. Could she face him? Could she endure hearing his excuses, his lies? She didn't know if she was strong enough to stand there and listen to the man who had ripped her world apart. The knock came again, louder this time, as if he was demanding entry. Her hand tightened around the crumpled letter in her lap. She stood, but her legs felt like they might give way beneath her. Every part of her body screamed to run, to hide, to escape the reality of the moment. But she knew she had to face him. She had to confront him, because in that confrontation, she would find the closure she desperately needed. The door creaked open, and there he stood, Chidi, his tall frame filling the doorway, his handsome face framed by the light behind him. His dark eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them crackled with unspoken emotions. How could he look so perfect, so untouchable, when he had shattered everything they had built together? He stepped inside, his presence overwhelming the space between them. She tried to hold her ground, but every part of her wanted to rush to him, to collapse in his arms, and let the world disappear. But no, not this time. This time she would be strong. "Why, Chidi?" she whispered, her voice thick with pain. He opened his mouth to respond, but she cut him off. "Don't," she said, raising her hand. "Don't tell me anything. I don't want to hear it." The battle within her was fierce. Her heart wanted him back, but her pride refused to be bent. Nkechi's heart raced as Chidi stepped closer, his voice low, attempting to bridge the emotional chasm between them. "Nkechi, I'm sorry," he began, but she shook her head sharply. "Sorry?" she repeated, the word feeling like a slap on her tongue. "You're sorry?" Her voice cracked with disbelief. The words felt empty, meaningless. She had heard them before, countless times, but they never changed anything. They never healed the wounds. She didn't want apologies. She wanted action. She wanted the truth, the whole truth. And she knew now, she was done waiting. Her heart might still want him, but her mind and soul were screaming for freedom. "I'm done, Chidi," she said, her voice steady, despite the storm raging inside her. The tension between Nkechi and Chidi was palpable, each of them walking on a tightrope of unspoken emotions. Despite everything, A part of her still longed for him. Every glance, every word, felt like an invitation back into his arms, but she had been burned too badly. She couldn't forget what he had done to her, no matter how much her heart wanted to. Chidi had his own demons, but Nkechi wasn't sure she could bear the weight of his secrets anymore. He hadn't come clean, and she couldn't just ignore the cracks in the foundation of their past. Yet, when their eyes met, a fire still ignited within her. Her pulse raced as his voice, rough with regret, filled the space between them. "I can't undo what I did, but I'm asking you to trust me again," he said, his voice low, almost pleading. The conversation took a turn when Chidi finally revealed something she hadn't expected. "There's more to this than you think, Nkechi," he said, his voice tight. The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of a secret he had kept from her. Nkechi's heart skipped a beat, the old wound of betrayal reopening. She had thought she knew everything, but now she wasn't so sure. His gaze never wavered, and there was something in his eyes that made her stomach twist with dread. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He took a deep breath, his lips tightening. "I didn't just hurt you, Nkechi. I hurt my family too." The revelation struck her like a blow. What did his family have to do with this? How deep did this betrayal go? "I don't want to hear it," she snapped, standing up suddenly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. Just as the weight of Chidi's confession settled in the air, the door to the cafe opened, and a familiar figure walked in. Nkechi's ex, Imani. She hadn't seen Imani in months, and her sudden appearance sent a wave of unease through her. Imani was everything Nkechi was trying to move past, everything that had once been a part of the love story she now wished to forget. She had never fully trusted Imani, but seeing her now, in this moment of vulnerability, made the tension even worse. Imani's eyes flicked over to their table, a sly smile tugging at her lips as she locked eyes with Chidi. Nkechi could feel her pulse quicken. What is she doing here? Imani didn't waste any time. "So, you two are still playing this game," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm as she slid into the seat next to Chidi, without waiting for an invitation. Nkechi's anger flared instantly, but she kept her voice steady. "This isn't a game," she replied, her eyes cold. "This is real life." Imani smirked, unfazed. "Is it? I thought you were done with him, Nkechi. I see you're still sitting here." Her words stung, but Nkechi refused to let her have the satisfaction of seeing her riled up. "I'm done when I say I'm done," Nkechi said, her voice firm and unyielding. Imani's gaze flickered between Chidi and Nkechi, her lips curling into a smile. As Imani finally left, Chidi stood up, his hand resting on the back of his chair. He took a deep breath, as if summoning the courage to face Nkechi. "I never wanted this to happen, Nkechi," he said softly, his voice rough. "But it did, and now I'm here, trying to fix things." His gaze was filled with desperation. Nkechi stood, facing him squarely, her eyes searching his face. "Why didn't you tell me, Chidi?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. "Why didn't you tell me the truth?" He closed his eyes briefly as if in pain, then looked back at her. "I didn't want to lose you," he confessed. "But losing you now might be the only thing that will save me." The words hung in the air like an unanswered prayer, their meaning heavy, bittersweet. Nkechi couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to spiral out of control. Every time she tried to move forward, Chidi pulled her back in, each moment filled with promises of redemption. But his actions didn't match his words, and the tension between them was growing unbearable. She found herself caught in a vicious cycle, pulled between love and pain, desire and betrayal. It had been a week since Imani's unexpected appearance, but her presence still haunted Nkechi's every thought. She couldn't understand why Chidi hadn't been completely honest with her. Each new revelation seemed like another crack in their foundation. As much as she wanted to believe in him, she couldn't ignore the warning signs anymore. The trust she had once freely given him now felt like a distant memory. She couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. After days of avoiding Chidi, Nkechi finally gave in. They met at the park, away from the world, away from their past. For a moment, It felt like things might return to normal, as though time could reverse itself. The sun was setting, casting a soft orange glow across the sky, and the air was cool, perfect for a walk. "I missed you," Chidi said quietly, his voice filled with longing. His gaze softened as he looked at her, his dark eyes reflecting vulnerability. Nkechi had always been able to see the boy he once was in his eyes, the man he could have been. She wanted to believe in him again, to step back into the warmth of his arms, but the truth was too loud to ignore. Her heart ached as she remembered the promises he had broken. The moment she thought she could breathe again, the truth came crashing down. Chidi's phone buzzed loudly in his pocket, and as he reached for it, his hand brushed against Nkechi's. She froze, her eyes flickering down to the screen. It wasn't a name she recognized. "Who's Zara?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. Chidi froze too, his eyes widening in alarm. It's nothing," he stammered, quickly locking the phone. But Nkechi wasn't convinced. The silence between them thickened, and her heart sank. This wasn't just a text, this was something more. A part of her already knew the answer, but she needed to hear him say it. "Chidi," she said, her voice shaking. "Tell me the truth." He hesitated, the guilt in his eyes speaking louder than words. The floodgates broke open. "Why did you keep this from me, Chidi?" Nkechi cried, her voice sharp with hurt. The storm that had been brewing inside her finally erupted, and she couldn't contain it any longer. "You promised me the truth, but this is a lie." Chidi stood motionless, his head bowed, unable to meet her gaze. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said again, but the words felt empty now. "You should have trusted me," Nkechi spat, her voice breaking. "I've trusted you with everything, Chidi, and this is how you repay me." Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. The anger burned hotter than the pain. She needed answers. Who is she? What's going on? In the days that followed, Nkechi barely saw Chidi. The silence between them was deafening, and her heart felt like it was drowning in the weight of everything unsaid. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the betrayal, the lies, and felt the sting of being left in the dark. She had given him everything, her love, her trust, her heart, and it had all been shattered. She couldn't move forward, couldn't think straight. The truth had finally been revealed, but it had torn apart the fragile thread of hope she'd been holding on to. The silence of her apartment felt suffocating. She missed him, but she knew she couldn't go back to him. Not after everything. She had to find a way to heal, to reclaim herself. But the road ahead felt uncertain. "What do I do now?" she whispered to herself as tears began to fall. The battle for her heart was far from over, but she knew one thing for sure. It was time to choose herself. The days that followed were clouded by confusion. Just when Nkechi thought she had seen the worst of Chidi's secrets, something far more shocking emerged. She was scrolling through her phone when an unexpected message popped up. A picture. A moment frozen in time. It was of Chidi, with a woman she didn't recognize standing close, their faces too intimate for comfort. The image sent a chill through her, and her hands began to tremble. Was this who he had been hiding all along? The message came from an anonymous number with a simple caption: "Truth always finds a way out." It was a warning, a message she could no longer ignore. Her heart raced as she called Chidi, her voice laced with disbelief and anger. "Who is she, Chidi?" she demanded, the weight of the image pressing down on her chest. His hesitation on the other end of the line was the final confirmation she needed. The truth was even darker than she could have imagined, and it shattered her once more. "I was trying to protect you," he said quietly. But the lie felt hollow now, and Nkechi realized that she had been living a fantasy all along. Chidi showed up at her door later that evening, his face pale and drawn. He had come to explain, to apologize, but Nkechi wasn't sure she could bear to hear it. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he said, his voice breaking. "I was a fool. I thought I could keep it all buried." But how many secrets had he buried, she wondered. How many lies had he fed her, wrapped up in promises and half-truths? You hurt me, Chidi, she whispered, stepping back from the door. I trusted you. She could see the remorse in his eyes, but the damage had been done. Yet, despite everything, despite the pain, a small part of her wanted to believe that he could change, that they could find a way back. I'll do whatever it takes to prove to you that I can be the man you deserve, he said, his eyes desperate. She studied him carefully, searching for any sign of sincerity. Could she trust him again? Was there still a chance for them, or was it too late? The silence between them stretched on, heavy with unanswered questions. Just when Nkechi thought she could begin to heal, the past came rushing back in the form of a phone call from her mother. Nkechi, we need to talk. Her mother's voice was sharp, urgent. The tension in her tone made her heart drop. What's wrong, Mom? She asked, already dreading the answer. It's about Chidi, her mother replied, her voice thick with something darker, disappointment perhaps, or fear. There's something you don't know. A cold shiver ran down Kika's spine. She had already been betrayed by Chidi, but what more could there be? What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her mother hesitated, then spoke the words that would unravel everything. He's not who you think he is. There's a history between our families, and is not good. The bombshell hit harder than anything she'd experienced before. The idea that Chidi's betrayal wasn't just personal, it was tied to her family's past, shattered everything she thought she knew. You need to stay away from him, Nkechi, her mother warned, her voice trembling. But could she? Could she just walk away from a man she still loved, even after everything? The next day, Chidi showed up at her apartment again, this time without the hesitance he'd had before. I need to tell you everything, he said, his voice low but steady. You deserve the truth, even if it destroys everything. Nkechi didn't know what to expect, but when Chidi began to explain the tangled history between their families, she felt the ground shift beneath her. My father was involved in something years ago, something your family never knew about, Chidi confessed. He made decisions that hurt both our families, and I've been trying to undo the damage ever since. The revelation hit her like a punch to the gut. All this time it wasn't just Chidi's actions that had torn them apart. It was the weight of family history, old grudges and secrets. I didn't want you to carry the burden of that, he said, his voice breaking. But I should have told you. Nkechi stood frozen, the words too much to take in all at once. How could something so deep, so entrenched have been hidden from her for so long? The truth was unraveling, and with it, everything she thought she knew about love, trust, and betrayal. I don't know if I can do this anymore, Nkechi whispered, her voice raw with emotion. The burden of Chidi's confession, the weight of the past, and the love she still felt for him all crashed down on her at once. You've hurt me in ways I can't even explain, she continued, her words barely audible. And I'm not sure I can ever forgive you for that. The tears she had been holding back for so long finally fell, her emotions spilling over in a rush. Chidi reached for her, his hand trembling, but she pulled away, the space between them now an unbridgeable chasm. I wish I could fix this, he said, his voice breaking. But I know it's too late. The words hung in the air like a death sentence, and for a moment, the world stood still. Nkechi knew that this was the moment where everything would change. She could either walk away, leaving behind the man she still loved, or she could stay, taking on a future filled with uncertainty and pain. The decision was hers to make. Nkechi had spent the past few days avoiding Chidi, but now, standing in front of him in the middle of the night, everything she had been running from was crashing back into her. Her heart raced as she looked at him, his eyes searching hers for something, anything, that could heal the damage. I've come to face everything, Nkechi, Chidi said, his voice hoarse. I can't keep hiding, and I can't keep lying to you. His words were like a dagger, twisting in her chest. She had waited for this moment, the moment he would finally take responsibility. But now that it was here, she wasn't sure if it was enough. Why now, Chidi? She asked, her voice cold, the anger bubbling beneath the surface. Why did you wait until everything was broken? The pain in her chest grew as he took a step closer, his eyes filled with regret. Because I didn't understand what I had until it was almost gone, he said quietly, his words barely above a whisper. And now I'm here, asking for one last chance to fix it. Nkechi's mind screamed to walk away, to not fall for his words, but her heart, her broken heart, was still tethered to him. She didn't know if she could let go, not yet. The silence that followed was deafening. Nkechi had heard the words, but they didn't feel like enough. You want a second chance, Chidi? She asked, her voice trembling with emotion. How do I know this time will be different? How do I know you won't lie again? Chidi's face tightened with pain as he stepped closer, his hand reaching out to her. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I need you to understand something. Everything I did out of fear, he confessed. Fear of losing you, fear of not being enough, fear of being just like my father. His voice broke, and Nkechi could see the raw vulnerability in his eyes, the man beneath the mistakes and lies. I don't want to keep running from what we could have, Nkechi. I want to fight for us. But her skepticism didn't fade. I don't know if I can trust you anymore, she whispered, the doubt clouding her mind. How do I know you won't betray me again? Chidi stood motionless, the weight of her words sinking in. For the first time he understood how much he had lost, and how much he might never get back. I can't do this anymore, Chidi. And Nkechi finally said, her voice heavy with finality. I can't keep living in this limbo, torn between what we were and what we are now. The words came out like a knife to her own heart, but they were true. She had given him so much, but the weight of his betrayal, the lies, the secrets, she couldn't carry them any longer. She had spent too long hoping, waiting for him to change, but now she realized that the only person she could truly depend on was herself. I've tried, I really have, she continued, her voice soft but firm. But I can't keep hurting like this. Chidi's face collapsed with the pain of her words, his expression crumbling under the realization that he had lost her. Please don't do this, he begged, his voice strained with emotion. But she shook her head, her heart breaking as she took a step back. I'm sorry, Chidi, she whispered, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. But I have to let go. For me. As she walked away from him, each step felt like a final goodbye. The night air was thick with the weight of what had just transpired, and though a part of her longed to look back, she didn't. There was nothing left to say. Nothing that could heal the cracks in her heart. Chidi's voice echoed in the distance, but she didn't stop. Nkechi, please, he shouted, his voice filled with desperation. I love you. The words hung in the air, like a cruel reminder of everything they had lost. But Nkechi didn't turn around. She couldn't. She had spent too many years fighting for something that wasn't meant to be. She had loved him with every fiber of her being, but now she knew that love could no longer be enough. She had to love herself more than the broken pieces he had left behind. Her heart was shattered, but in this moment, it was whole again. She was free. The next morning, everything felt different. The city seemed quieter, the weight of the past finally lifting. Nkechi woke up in her own bed, her heart still heavy but lighter than it had been in weeks. She had made a choice, and though the pain of it lingered, she knew it was the right one. She had let go of a love that had once consumed her, a love that had brought both joy and agony. But now, there was space for something new, something that was hers and hers alone. I'm free, she whispered to herself, a small smile tugging at her lips. It wasn't a happy ending, but it was her ending, and that was enough. She had finally taken control of her life, her heart, and her future. She could heal now. She could move forward. The days after the confrontation felt like an endless blur. Nkechi spent most of her time in her apartment, wrestling with her emotions. The quiet had become both a comfort and a curse. There were no more late-night calls, no more visits from Chidi, just the overwhelming silence of an empty space. For the first time in months, she had no one to turn to. No one to soothe the ache inside her. But she wasn't sure if she was ready to let anyone in. The solitude felt safe, like a protective wall she could build around herself. She could hear the city bustling outside her window, but it felt like she was in a different world altogether. A world where Chidi no longer existed. There were no more tears, no more fights, only quiet reflection. But the emptiness lingered, gnawing at her, reminding her that she was alone in this new chapter of her life. And in that silence, she began to hear the sound of her own heart again. Slowly, she was learning to breathe without him. It was during one of her lonelier moments that Nkechi's phone buzzed, pulling her from the depths of her thoughts. It was Amara, her best friend since childhood. "Hey, I'm coming over," Amara's text read. Nkechi didn't respond, but the truth was she needed her more than she cared to admit. She hadn't wanted to lean on anyone, to appear weak, but Amara knew her too well. Amara had always been the one to show up when life seemed too much to handle, even if it meant showing up unannounced. Not long after, the doorbell rang, and when Nkechi opened it, Amara stood there with a wide grin and a takeout bag in her hand. "I know you're not going to talk about it," Amara said as she walked in, "but you need food, so that's step one." Amara didn't press her for details, but her presence was the comfort Nkechi didn't know she needed. As they sat down to eat, Amara simply said, "You're going to get through this, Nkechi. You don't have to do it alone." And for the first time in days, Nkechi allowed herself to believe that maybe she didn't. As the days passed, Nkechi found herself reconsidering everything she had closed herself off from. She had spent so much time holding on to anger, but with Amara's support and her own moments of introspection, she realized she wasn't just punishing Chidi. She had been punishing herself too. One evening, she found herself picking up her phone and dialing Chidi's number, her fingers trembling. When he answered, his voice was hesitant, unsure. "Nkechi?" he asked softly. "I didn't think you'd ever talk to me again." The sincerity in his voice made her heart ache. "I don't know what to say, Chidi," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't want to hate you anymore." There was a pause before Chidi spoke, his words full of gratitude. "I don't want to lose you, Nkechi. I'll do whatever it takes to prove I can be the man you deserve." The weight between them was still there, but this time, it wasn't just about regret, it was about healing. Maybe they couldn't go back to what they had, but perhaps they could start again, from a place of understanding, no longer weighed down by the past. Just as things began to feel like they were moving in the right direction, the past reared its ugly head once more. Nkechi's father, whom she had been distant from for years, called unexpectedly. "Nkechi, I need to talk to you about something," he said, his voice serious. She braced herself for whatever he was about to say, but what came next shocked her to her core. "It's about Chidi," he began. "I know you don't want to hear it, but there's more to his family's history than you know." Her father's words only deepened the pit in her stomach. "I didn't want to keep this from you, but you need to understand that Chidi's past is tangled with ours. It's not just him you're forgiving, it's the entire family." The weight of her father's words left her speechless. The tangled mess of family secrets, grudges and betrayals had never truly been far away. And now, she had to face it head on. Could she trust Chidi, knowing that his family had been involved in her own family's pain? The storm inside her had finally begun to settle. The days following her father's call were filled with moments of reflection and painful realizations. She had spent so much of her life running from her past, from Chidi's family, and from the weight of history that tied them all together. But now, Nkechi knew that moving forward meant acknowledging that past, not erasing it. It meant accepting the pain and the lessons that came with it, but not allowing it to define her. One evening as she sat by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and orange, she realized that she wasn't running anymore. She was standing tall, ready to face whatever came next, with or without Chidi. And while the scars from the past would always be there, she was no longer afraid of them. "I'm ready," she whispered to herself. "I'm ready for the future." Nkechi stood at the edge of the balcony, her gaze fixed on the city below. The skyline was bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun, but her heart was weighed down by a heaviness that wouldn't lift. She had walked away from Chidi, from a life they had built together, but the memories, those memories lingered like shadows in the corners of her mind. She had spent so long trying to keep it all together, trying to fix something that was broken beyond repair. And now here she was, facing the reality that some things, no matter how much love you put into them, can never be mended. I loved him, she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible in the cool breeze. But sometimes love isn't enough. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, as the wind tousled her natural curls. It was time to let go, not just of Chidi, but of the pain that had kept her bound. As the sun dipped below the horizon, she felt the weight begin to lift, and for the first time in a long while, she felt free. The next morning, the city seemed a little brighter, the world a little quieter. Nkechi had spent the night reflecting on everything she had been through, and the quiet of the morning was like a balm to her soul. As she sipped her coffee, she felt a sense of clarity settle over her. She wasn't sure where the future would take her, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't need all the answers. I don't have to know everything, she thought to herself. I just have to keep moving forward. It was a revelation that was both freeing and terrifying. There were no more questions about Chidi, no more wondering if she had made the right choice. She had made peace with it. As she looked out the window, the sun was rising higher, the light bathing everything in a soft new glow. She was beginning to see the world again, not through the lens of heartbreak, but through the eyes of someone who had learned to let go. As the days went on, the reality of moving forward began to settle in. Nkechi found herself standing at a crossroads, unsure of which path to take. There was no guidebook for this, no manual for healing, no step-by-step instructions on how to rebuild a broken heart. But she was learning that strength didn't come from never feeling pain. It came from allowing yourself to feel it, then moving through it. I can't keep looking back, she told herself one morning, as she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the empty space beside her. The bed that once held so many memories with Chidi now felt foreign to her. She took a deep breath and stood up. It was time to start again, one small step at a time. There were days when it felt impossible, when the weight of everything felt too heavy to bear. But Nkechi was learning to carry it, to take each day as it came, and not to rush the process. Slowly, she was learning to trust herself again. One evening, just as she was starting to feel like she had found her footing again, she received a message from Chidi. I'm sorry, Nkechi, it read, the words simple yet filled with the weight of everything they had gone through. She hesitated before reading it, her heart skipping a beat. I can't change the past, but I need you to know that I regret everything I did. I'll always love you. The message sent a wave of emotions through her. It was as if all the hurt, all the love, and all the questions she had buried inside came rushing back. But as she read the words again, she realized that this wasn't about him anymore. It was about her. She had already made her decision. The truth had been revealed, the consequences of their choices had been faced, and now, it was time to move on. She didn't respond immediately, instead sitting in silence, reflecting on how far she had come. The truth was painful, but it was also freeing. And with that she closed her phone and moved forward. In the end, it wasn't the grand gestures or the promises that defined her journey, it was the quiet moments. The moments when she stood on her own, when she chose herself over the past, when she decided that her happiness wasn't dependent on anyone else's approval. Nkechi had learned that love could be both beautiful and painful. And sometimes, letting go was the ultimate form of self-love. I'll never forget the love we shared, she whispered to herself, standing by the window, looking out at the city below. But I have to move forward. The words were like a final breath, a release of everything that had held her back. The past was no longer a weight around her neck. It was a part of her story, but it didn't define her anymore. She was ready to face whatever came next, with the strength of knowing that she had survived the hardest part, choosing herself.